Good morning, everyone. My name is Chinenya Iroajanma, and I'm happy to introduce our second panel titled Birth Entrepreneurs, Midwives, and the Creation of Organizations to Encourage Autonomy, Choice, and Confidence in Black Birthing People, moderated by Ms. Victoria Ravel. Victoria Ravel is a nationally award-winning public health practitioner dedicated to addressing health disparities and increasing health equity. As the great-great-granddaughter of North Carolina midwife Henrietta Jeffries, Victoria is devoted to maternal and child health and birth equity. Through her Global Health Go public health leadership initiative, Victoria has promoted health equity in the US, France, Spain, and Italy. She is a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and a proud graduate of North Carolina A&T State University and Morehouse's School of Medicine's Master Public Health Program, where she was trained by our nation's 16th U.S. Surgeon General. Please welcome moderator Victoria Ravel to the stage.
To paraphrase the great Dr. Maya Angelou, who I believe is looking down on us with joy this morning, I hope that this new day may give you the grace and the courage to look up and look out into your brother's eyes and into your sister's face and say with courage and hope, clearly, very clearly, good morning. My beloved, it brings me great pleasure to introduce to you a panel of esteemed and accomplished women who will be with us this morning, specifically talking about entrepreneurship and indeed one of our favorite topics, birth equity. Won't you help me welcome and give a round of applause to our very first speaker, Miss Carrie Stewart. Carrie is a full-scope midwife. She currently practices on the south side of Chicago within the University of Illinois Square Health Center and Department, OBGYN. She is the former director of midwifery services at the University of Chicago Medical Center and the current president of the American College of Nurse Midwives, Illinois affiliate. She is also the founder of Melanated Midwives, a nonprofit organization that addresses Black maternal health disparities and maternal health deserts. Welcome. Our second panelist is Christina Lussaint. She is a women's healthcare specialist, a family nurse practitioner, and the owner and operator of the Hydration Bar, which promotes health and wellness through vitamin infusion therapy. She is also the co-founder of Josiah's Heart Foundation, which focuses on pregnancy loss awareness. The Heart Foundation was initiated through her personal experience and journey through her pregnancy loss at 38 weeks. She has over 10 years of comprehensive experience in both private and public healthcare settings. Won't you help me welcome her to the panel this morning? Our final panelist is Dr. Michelle Drew, a certified nurse midwife and family nurse practitioner, and the founder and executive director of Ubuntu Family Health Collective, a community-based organization that serves as a social safety net in Wilmington. Dr. Drew is a first-generation college graduate, but a 10th-generation midwife. Indeed, she has a documented ancestry of midwives back to her 7th great-grandmother, a free Black woman in Surrey County, Virginia, named Sarah. Family, I'm so excited. Help me welcome this panel. So as we get started with our second panel this morning, I am interested, and I'm sure you are too, in knowing about the origin story. How did these speakers get here? And how did they desire to have their own organizations that really are helping our nation move forward? For me, my own origin story begins with my great-great-great-grandmother in the 1800s, who was an entrepreneur and a midwife who delivered more than 200 babies, and who became so great at her gift and at her practice that white women of that day began to tell the white doctors that they weren't interested in their services because they wanted to have their babies delivered by Henrietta Jeffries. Needless to say, this caused a stir within the establishment. And eventually, she was taken to court and charged with a crime. The penalty, if found guilty, was death by hanging. The judge asked, "How do you plead?" And she simply said, "If you mean, did I help these women when they needed me most? Yes, I am guilty." After hearing all the facts of the case and looking at her record in maternal and child health and in midwifery, the judge stood up from his bench, unzipped his black robe, came down and stood beside her and said, "On the charge of practicing medicine without a license, I find you not guilty." This courage of this origin story is what inspired me to want to go on and practice public health, and inspired me to say, okay, together we have a blueprint of resilience that we can move forward. So ladies, share with us your origin story that led to your own calling in midwifery.
Good morning. I will share that the majority of my aunts and uncles were born in the home in Yazoo, Mississippi. And so I didn't necessarily know my calling until I had my own child and was taken care of by a midwife. And that was in Indiana. And so what I learned in that experience was it was a very family-oriented practice that I was involved in. The clinic was a home. And so it was set up that the living room was your check-in area, and the bedrooms was your clinical visit area. And so I just really felt welcomed in that type of care. I had already wanted to be an OB-GYN, but that shifted my trajectory to become a midwife. And I am grateful that I did so.
Well, in my family, I'm the only second healthcare worker in my entire family. I have a cousin that is a nurse, and she doesn't work in the maternal space, so I'm the first maternal birth worker in my family. And my journey started when I was in middle school. How many of you all remember TLC, A Baby Story? I used to watch it every single day when I came home from middle school. And from then, I realized I wanted to work in maternal health in some kind of way. At first, I wanted to be a neonatologist. But then, you take that first. When you get to college, you take the chemistry courses and all of the sciences and math that you realize you have to take. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do nursing instead. And it was the best decision that I have ever made because I absolutely love healthcare and the nursing industry. So labor and delivery is where I started out, straight out of college. Thankfully, I got that first job as a L&D nurse when everyone was saying, oh, no, you have to do med-surg. You have to go through the med-surg route first. And I was like, no, I know I want to do L&D. And so thankfully, I was able to get into that space initially. And so worked L&D for about 7-8 years or so, and then decided I wanted to get my NP degree. Did FNP because I wanted to keep my options open, but realized that, of course, maternity and women's health is my passion. Last year, June 8th, is when I had my own personal pregnancy story of having a pregnancy loss at 38 weeks, unfortunately. And at that time, I was in a space where it's like, you know what? Forget maternal health. This is not what I need to do because, your worst fear comes true. And so I had the opportunity of going back and working in an L&D unit in New Jersey. And I realized that I worked with a bunch of Caucasian residents, and I was like, this is the future of maternal health, and I said, no, this is where I'm supposed to be. Because I have a passion for women's health. I have a passion for keeping women safe, not just only Black women, but women as a whole. And so that's kind of where my journey started and where I am today. And with my own personal pregnancy loss story, Josiah's Heart Foundation was founded, and basically the support and resources that I needed and desired through my story, I'm able to provide that to other women. So that's where my organization began. Yes.
Can I say thank you?
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Most folks would, not be willing to and be brave enough to come and share such a personal story. So thank you.
Thank you.
So much like your story, my calling to midwifery is an ancestral calling. I have told people in my life that midwifery is not my profession, it's my vocation. And for the folks who tried to keep me out, it was my birthright. So, good luck to you. And the activist work that I do also within the community, both officially and through our organization, again, it was called I'm the daughter of Mabel, who was a Black Panther in Washington, D.C. in the 1970s, but I'm the granddaughter of Viola, a midwife from Prince George County, Virginia. She caught me. I was the child who was least trustable on those summers when you got sent home down south. All of us, if you were a child from the Northeast or the Midwest who had grandparents that lived in the South, you knew what it was to be sent back down south in the summer so your parents could work a second job or whatever. I was the one that couldn't be trusted. So when everybody else got to run through the woods and play and do whatever, I got taken with her on house calls. The first birth I was at was when I was probably 3 years old, and I went with her on home visits until 1978 when the state of Virginia took her permit. So her mother, my great-grandmother Stella, my great-great-grandmother Mabel. So I have people who've been catching babies in my family for 270 years. So I went to nursing school first, and I thought, for a while, I'm going to become an acute care nurse practitioner because their life is real easy. They stay in the ICU, they put in a few lines, they read some x-rays, and then they only work those 3 12-hour shifts a week. But when your ancestors call you, they call you. And you can't deny that call. So really, I came to midwifery because it was truly my birthright. And then what brought me to form Ubuntu was trying to work within the medical industrial complex and trying to be true to myself and who I am as a midwife. I was sort of being bombarded on all sides. I worked, with a midwifery service, but I've also worked in 2 institutions right at the time. The books are written on obstetrics. I have a copy of Gabby's obstetrics that he personally gave me as my graduation gift. But knowing that I couldn't change the system, and every time I tried, I was being punished for it. And as my dear friend and sister, Dr. Monica McLemore, said, you have 3 choices with with something that's failing. You can either retrofit, redesign, or reimagine. And realizing that there was no retrofit for what I wanted to do. The only way was to reimagine it and leave the health system and form the health system within our community that we deserved.
Thank you all so much. As I listen to what you all are saying and what we've learned thus far today, it's true that there's a lot going on in our world, but I realize that we still have so much to be grateful for. Within my own maternal and child health career, one of the things that I'm most grateful for is those mentorship and mentee opportunities. One of the fondest ones was working with the CDC, where we created a program and a virtual recruitment event to recruit 1,000 HBCU students and recent graduates to come and meet with hiring managers to learn about their opportunities and to really have an opportunity to understand what it means to be the future. In that, what I realized is that at the end of the day, we all could use a little more help. So I want to give an opportunity now for each of you to speak about where you are currently within your journey and how our audience can reach out and help you.
Amen. Because, you know, it takes a village. It really does. And I'm so grateful for the village that I have been introduced into since I've been in midwifery. And my career has really catapulted here in the past 5 years quickly. And with that, help is needed. So I started as a labor and delivery nurse. I had that job. I didn't get the first time, but I worked in a family clinic on the west side of Chicago. And then I got the calling from Mount Sinai, which, you know, a lot of individuals call Mount Dinah, unfortunately, because it is one of those hospitals that you see a lot of Black and brown individuals die at. And very under-resourced. But, you know, I tell people if you can work at Mount Sinai, you can work at County Hospital in Chicago, you can work anywhere. And so I was grateful for that opportunity. But then I did that while I was in nursing school, while I was in midwifery school, actually. And so that helped me continue on. But what I learned in my midwifery experience, being one of very few Black women, I was a single mother also, they want to tell you can't work, you shouldn't work. You should not be doing all these other things, you should be focused on school. If you would allow me to do so, I don't have that privilege. And you cannot tell me that I can't take care of my child while I'm going to school. And so things like that are very discouraging to students. And so that was pretty much the driving force for me to start Melanated Midwives. Because I was one of those students who was struggling financially, trying to figure out how to get through school, determined not to quit. It's what I wanted to do. And so what I do with Melanated Midwives, which is a 501c3 organization, is we provide annual scholarships to students in the amount of $5,000 to help them continue on through their schooling. Specifically, if they need funding to get to those internships, to get to those clinicals. You know, a lot of people are traveling great distances to get to their preceptors. And that is a barrier in itself. I had a student who, you know, at the brink of not finishing, who needed funding for travel just to get to a different place from where she's living. And I mean other states. She had to go to another state to get her completion of her internship. And stuff like that is just, it's disappointing, but we should not have barriers as Black and brown people to do this work. And it's an unnecessary barrier. So I have stepped in. I have, you know, this has been my calling to support those, give back. And so that is how I am asking folks to help Melanated Midwives donate to us so we can get this profession diversified. We started this. We should not be struggling to be here.
As far as with my organization, with Josiah's Heart Foundation, which I co-own with my husband, who's in the audience as well. And so basically what we do is we provide financial support to families who are going through pregnancy loss. So as you know, with FMLA, you may get your 8 weeks unpaid, you know, or you may, if you have where you get like your 40 or 60% of your paycheck through short-term disability, you may have that. And there's a lot of families who don't have that. My husband is a full-time entrepreneur, so he doesn't get that luxury. However, we had a community of people in support during our pregnancy loss where they donated about $13,000 to us so that we could take more time off of work to go through our healing process, which is needed. And I have patients who go through pregnancy loss and they have to go back to work, 4 to 8 weeks later. That's not enough time to get your bearings, let alone go through, you may have postpartum depression, or you may just have depression, severe depression from the grieving process alone. And so what we do is we provide financial support to families, to where our desire is to financially support in any kind of way for at least 3 months, whether it's paying a light bill, whether it's paying a mortgage, whether it's, buying groceries for these families, just to relieve in any kind of way. And so we are taking donations with Josiah's Heart Foundation. We are attempting to get or trying to go through the process of doing the 501c3 status as well. And so you could provide support by making financial donations, or if you are very well versed in that nonprofit space, just providing information, because that's very helpful. And then on the other side of it is I would like to really encourage Black and brown people to get higher education. I know that getting a doctorate may not be something that you may think about utilizing right now. However, when we see more people in these higher educated spaces like we have here, that's when you really can get into the research and contributing to the research and contributing to the background of healthcare, which will really push forward the momentum of Black maternal health. So that will be another way that I would encourage people to support the movement. Yes.
I'm going to invoke my father, the minister, out here. And it's like I feel a spirit of the Lord telling me that there's somebody in this room who wants to give me $1 million. So we just claiming this right now in the name of Jesus. I know that there's somebody out there that believes that Black women and Black babies should not die because of our melanin expression and wants to see them cared for, Black midwives and Black doulas and Black lactation consultants. So come on now, lay your hands. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sorry, I'm silly. But I do. I know there's somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. Tell Warren Buffett to call me. Tell McKinsey to call me. Tell him to call all of us. So Ubuntu is actually in its 4th year of existence, and it really came into existence when I was working full-time as both a midwife and as faculty in an OBGYN residency program, and I was fighting all the time, and tired of fighting for things that I thought should be simple, right? Why should I have to fight to let Black women, let Indigenous women, let Latinx women function with autonomy? Why do I have to fight for respect with an intern or a 2nd or a 3rd year or a 4th year or frankly, a new attending OBGYN when I've been a midwife for 20 plus years to prove to you that I know what I'm doing. I was, fighting for my own respect, fighting for other midwives' respect, and fighting for patients, and really, fighting for their lives. And it was exhausting. I spent so much of my free time also doing other things that they needed, the social safety net things that they needed to thrive. They needed pack and pace because otherwise the hospital's going to report them to CPS. They don't have formula, or, like if you know somebody who qualifies for WIC, here's a clue. WIC does not actually cover the cost of a month's worth of formula. So they shouldn't have to choose between not eating to be able to buy formula or watering down formula. So I was just doing a lot of fighting, and I thought, well, what if I just pull myself out of the medical industrial complex and just start an organization that unapologetically centered Black families. And the reason we're called Ubuntu Black Family Wellness, because it was intentional. Ubuntu means community. In many of the Bantu languages, I'd lived in Zambia for 11 years, and when the answer when someone is in need, is always, of course. And so it's given, and the reason why is Ubuntu. It's because, I only exist because I am part of this community. If this whole community doesn't thrive, I can't thrive. How can I be well watching the women that I am caring for in their pregnancies, their partners, their extended family, and their babies suffer? And so, again, I was never going to be able to convince the medical industrial complex, and I tried. Let me do centering, centering doesn't work. I'm also a board certified family nurse practitioner. Let me keep babies, and so moms don't have to choose between which appointment to keep. I can still do a postpartum visit and a newborn visit. That's not, nope, that's not how we do it. You know, let's figure out a way to get transportation. Let's do, virtual visits. It took a whole pandemic before people said we could do virtual visits. How about house calls? So I just said I'm going to form a practice where we do that. Our current location is in a church. It's the church that my family started in the 1950s. And what used to be the child, Sunday school room is my exam room. Another Sunday school room is our diaper bank. And, a old closet is our lactation room. And we're in the process now of renovating the kitchen so that we can not only have our food pantry, our food program, but that we can have a hot food program and have nutrition classes to help mothers do everything. We can build, a community-centered place. And, to be honest, maybe other than doing more things, there are places out there for me that were the model. The other thing that I do is I precept both midwifery students, all types of midwifery students, CM, CNM, and CPM. So I have 2 student midwives now who are working on, being qualified for the NARM exam, and they do home births with me. I keep 1 CNM student, and I constantly have a CNM student with me, and they're always Black, and I'm unapologetic about that because I never forget what it was like. I was slightly older when I went to midwifery school. It was like 29. But I remember how people tried unsuccessfully to bully me, how they tried to tell me that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't smart enough, that I would never make it because I was working full-time at the medical center to get tuition reimbursement. And I never had a midwife that looked like me as a preceptor. The first Black preceptor that I had was a pediatrician at Meharry during my peds rotation. And he was an older gentleman and wonderful, and I still remember the day he just looked at me and put both hands on my shoulders the way, only old Southern gentlemen can do, and said, "Baby, you're gonna be so good at this. Don't you worry." And then, of course, walked away to see the next of 40 patients he sees a day. And, finding mentors and friends. I'm thankful that Mama Jenny Joseph is here. She is one of my many mentors, somebody that I can call. I kneel at her feet every time I see her. I see people who have been midwives much less time doing it much better than me. Dr. Nakia Grayson is going to be speaking today. Choices in Memphis, to me, is the prototype of what a community-based center can and should be. I'm just thankful to be here. But yeah, we need your prayers. We need your retweets. And please, call Warren. Tell him, I need 10 minutes of his time.
Thank you all so much. And audience, I want us to be serious now about investing in what we know to be the future. The other point that I certainly want to make sure we raise this morning is understanding and really honoring the power of our collective ancestors. I know for many of us, we hold them near and dear to our hearts as we're moving throughout this work. One of the ones that I always try to speak her name is one of the founders of my dear sorority, Mary Edna Brown Coleman, who unfortunately died during childbirth. In my research, I learned that policies, practices, and procedures seem to play a big role regarding who lives and who dies during childbirth. Ladies, if you could please speak to how policies, procedures, and protocols impact your ability to treat birthing people.
The pandemic really highlighted a lot of things that are lacking in Chicago, specifically on the south side of Chicago. If you are not aware, Chicago is a very segregated city. And the south side and the west sides are predominantly Black and brown neighborhoods. So with that, we were already losing labor and delivery units on the south side before the pandemic hit. The pandemic hit, and then we go from about I want to say 13 labor and delivery units to 4. And so with that, families were scrambling to find out where they needed to go for their care, whether they transfer their care. In institutions, there's always this barrier. Oh, you're 32 weeks, we can't see you that late. Well, where's she gonna go? Where's she gonna go? That's a barrier, okay? That policy doesn't work. We should be allowing individuals to come in at any time because we're not providing it in their neighborhood. That's not their fault, that's our fault. The other thing is we do not have a birth center on the south side of Chicago, but they're everywhere else in Chicago and in the suburbs of Chicago. And that's because they have the money and we don't. And it's unfortunate that those barriers, the lack of privilege, not having a pharmacy on every corner, not having a clinic on every corner, but you'll invest in things that are not of health for us. And so we're dying, not only with the gun violence and all those things, but in birth, and that is not acceptable. And because we do not have the resources. And so, the way that the institutions are structured, who they want to invest in, that's a problem. And so being in the position that I am, I have just joined the University of Illinois Health Systems that just opened a FQHC on the south side of Chicago. We've been there since October, and we're really wanting to highlight our women's health programs, the things that we're doing there. We're partnering with community organizations. Health institutions have to partner with community organizations. It is a must. It is a must. And I say that because they have already been doing the work and figured it out. So why aren't we asking them the questions? So we would be naive to not engage with them on the ground. That's how we solve this problem.
So I'm a little bit of a rule breaker. I work, of course, outpatient in an OBGYN clinic. And so policies and procedures, they're great. They're good. But like Kanisha talked about in the previous panel, there's anecdotal ways that we can provide care as well. And so my main thing is shared decision making with my patients. Gone are the days where you come in and the doctor is going to tell you what you're going to do. No, we're going to make this decision together. And so, for instance, just about, gestational diabetes screenings, where I have some patients that don't want to do an early 1 hour based off of their BMIs, or, they just don't want to do the glucose screening at all. Well, there's alternatives to that, and we're going to explore that, I work in a office where there's a lot of older physicians and providers. And so, being able to challenge their mindsets, challenge some of those policies, look for evidence-based practice that is more updated. There are jelly bean tests, there are sub-Q scanners that are available now where patients don't have to prick their fingers, 3 times a day like they used to. And so just being being knowledgeable and up to date on those policies, but also being able to provide alternatives because they are out there. It just takes that additional time to make people aware of and educate. And a big thing for me, of course, is representation within the maternal health space. But representation alone is not enough. It's being educated, knowledgeable, it's being able to speak up and advocate for your patients as well. And so I would encourage anyone considering going into the birthing space and the maternal space to not only just show up, but actually to do the work to be there for your patients.
For me, the most important thing is to know the rules, and there are people who hate me because I love to read. I read bylaws, I read policy and procedure, but the truth of the matter is there's a lot of things that people do in the labor and delivery suite that really are not evidence-based at all. I know ACOG's recommendations for what happens with a healthy woman who's in spontaneous labor, and they don't even know them. I have read the rules, and more importantly, one of the things that I did was petitioned and lobbied and worked with our legislators until I got all advanced practice nurses, including nurse midwives, practice autonomy. So now guess what? As a member of the medical dental staff, baby, I don't gotta do nothing but stay black and die. I'm gonna write my orders, and y'all gonna follow them. And unless you can tell me why it's not safe, We're not going there. So, work to change laws in and out and work to change rules. I'm on the Joint Commission Technical Advisory Panel for the perinatal standards. So when the chief of OB comes in and says, you can't do ABC because of the Joint Commission, I'm like, lies, and let me send an email right now to find out. We know that healthy women, first of all, blackness is not a disease. Pregnancy is not a disease. Birth is not a procedure. So I don't need you to cure me of anything. I need you to do what obstetrics means and stand by to be ready if something happens. But I don't need you to interfere, and you don't have the right to write policies that take away a human's right to autonomy. So I teach every client, regardless. It's not shared decision-making, it's your decision-making. I can give you my what, I can give you my why, I can tell you what the hospital's gonna tell you, I can tell you what the OBGYN on call is gonna tell you before I get there. But at the end of the day, you get to make the decision because it's your body, it's your pregnancy. So from the time you conceive until it ends, however it's going to end, because all pregnancies end, but all pregnancies don't end in a live birth. This is you, and I don't care what the Supreme Court says. I don't care what Greg Abbott says. You are still an autonomous human being who gets to make those decisions because you get to live with the consequences of how they end.
To our audience online, I want to say thank you all so much for engaging with us this morning. I am so proud of each of these people that sit here, and I look forward to the questions that we'll be able to ask them during our lunch period to learn more about how we can help support their work. And as we close this session, we acknowledge that what we're doing is hard work, right? It certainly is hard, but at the end of the day, I also believe this is holy work. We are called specifically, and at this time, for this purpose, that we can change literally the fate of our nation and hopefully even the fate of our world. Thank you, entrepreneurs, for leading the way, and we look forward to our lunch together today.